Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is day 15 of Crimemas, and today we will be diving into the case of Elizabeth Olten. Elizabeth Olten was born on December 15th, 1999. She was the youngest of three kids and was described to be friendly and extremely loving. On the 21st of October 2009, it was a regular day for Elizabeth, her mother Patty, and her two older siblings, Anthony and Stephanie. Now, the kids were playing around during the afternoon, and Elizabeth was actually rehearsing for a school play, while their mother, Patty, was preparing for dinner. And as she was doing so, she heard a knock on their front door, and upon opening it, she sees their 6-year-old neighbor named Emma. Emma asked Patty if Elizabeth could go outside and play. And at first, Patty was hesitant because it was already 5 p.m. at this point. However, she eventually gave in and reminded Elizabeth to be back within the hour. However, 6 p.m. rolls around and Elizabeth was not back home yet. And this was not like Elizabeth. This was extremely out of character for her to disobey her mother. And most importantly, she would never purposefully stay out at night because she was completely terrified of the dark. Worried, Patty calls Emma's grandmother, asking if Elizabeth was still at their house. And to her horror, she wasn't. In fact, Emma's grandmother said that Emma had been home the whole time and Elizabeth was never there. Patty reported her daughter missing to the authorities right away, and within 15 minutes, the search for 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten began. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers from the community gathered and searched the nearby woods, thinking that Elizabeth may have wandered off and had gotten lost. And at this point during the search, no foul play was suspected to be involved. Patty kept on trying to call Elizabeth's cell phone, but it would go straight to voicemail all the time. The local authorities also contacted the carrier, and there were 3 pings indicating that Elizabeth was indeed in the wooded area somewhere. However, this only gave a general area and didn't point to exactly where she was. And those woods were huge. The police then decided to talk to Emma, who was the last person seen with Elizabeth before she disappeared. And according to her initial story, she and Elizabeth played for about an hour before Elizabeth started walking home. However, she changed this story to Elizabeth being stuck or being caught in thorned bushes, resulting to them asking Alyssa for help. Now, Alyssa Bustamante was Emma's older half-sister. She was born in 1994, making her 15 at the time. She was a very troubled teenager and grew up in her grandmother's custody, as her own mom was a drug addict while her father, who she was still in contact with, was in prison. Now, Alyssa was a very angsty teen who struggled with her mental health and had suicidal thoughts. And since Emma brought her up and the police knew that she had also seen Elizabeth that day, they decided to look into Alyssa a little bit. On her YouTube channel, she listed killing people as one of her hobbies, which is super strange and creepy TBH. But the police didn't really see her as someone who would have a motive against a 9-year-old girl. And she wasn't treated as a suspect initially. However, law enforcement then discovered that Alyssa Bustamante had actually skipped school that day. And out of all the local kids in the area, Alyssa was the only one who wasn't accounted for. Now, the authorities quickly obtained a search warrant for Emma and Alyssa's home, and this is when they've discovered something sinister. Her bedroom walls were completely covered in writings and drawings, all done with her own blood. These images on her wall were extremely graphic and horrific, with one of them even being labeled as Emma, her 6-year-old younger sister. Within the same search of this home, the law enforcement officers were also able to locate Alyssa's diary, where she would often write her deepest and most despicable thoughts. However, the last entry was completely scribbled out in blue ink. And seeing that this entry was written on the day of Elizabeth's disappearance, the police knew that they had to find out what Alyssa had to say that day. Now, as they were trying to figure this out, they also interviewed Alyssa's friends and family, with one of her peers stating that Alyssa at one point randomly asked her, "I wonder what it would feel like to kill someone, to see the life drain out of someone. I wonder what it would feel like, that type of power, to just take that away from someone." Now, the police used a backlight in an attempt to read the scribbled out diary entry, and by doing so, they were able to uncover two words: slit and throat. They took Alyssa in for another questioning, and at first she was trying to tell them that Elizabeth had actually fallen and died by hitting her head on the ground. But at this point, the authorities already knew that these were all lies. They then asked her, "Did you slit her throat?" To which Alyssa Bustamante says, "Yes." Her grandmother, who was also in the interrogation room with her, broke down. Disgusted, she left the room, and this is when Alyssa confessed to everything that happened that day. That day, Alyssa Bustamante asked her 6-year-old sister Emma to go fetch Elizabeth from her house. She then told Emma to go back home, and this is when she started to lead Elizabeth to the nearby woods, telling her that she had something to show her, as she held the 9-year-old girl's hands. Now, they walked for around 15 minutes, and this is when Alyssa showed Elizabeth a hole on the ground. And unbeknownst to Elizabeth, this was actually a grave pre-dug by Alyssa 5 days prior. Alyssa then grabbed Elizabeth by the throat, strangling her. She then stabbed the poor girl before slitting her throat and buried her in this shallow makeshift grave. Alyssa Bustamante then led the authorities to where she had buried Elizabeth's body. They also noted the fact that if you look closely, you could still see her limbs poking out of the ground. So this means that Alyssa Bustamante had 15 minutes with this 9-year-old girl. She had 15 whole Christian minutes to think about what she was going to do next, and yet she still pushed through with her plans. Anyway, the police then uncovered the rest of that diary entry. After saying that she had slit Elizabeth's throat, Alyssa goes on to writing, "It was amazing. Once you get over the OMG I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I gotta go to church now, LOL." 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante was tried as an adult due to the severity of her crime. She pleaded not guilty and was hoping for a lesser charge due to her mental health struggles. However, the court saw this crime as a premeditated murder and not an act of impulse. Alyssa then accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She was given the sentence of life in prison plus 30 years with the possibility of parole in 35 years and 5 months. In 2014, Alyssa Bustamante tried to appeal her sentence but was denied. And that is pretty much all that I have for you guys for today's video. As usual, I would love to hear your thoughts on this case, and should there be any other case that you would like for me to cover, please let me know by leaving a comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow.